Okay, we're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell here on Community Matters because community matters matter with Representative Mark Takai of the State House of Representatives, who is also running for Congress. And I guess the important thing, welcome to the show, Mark.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you here, and we always like to do that. And I think the important thing is to note that Mark has been a supporter of the military and of Veterans Affairs. He spent a long time, 15 years in the National Guard, and he is also the proud owner of not one but two Nissan Leafs.
Actually, it's one Leaf, but I got my second one. So I turned in my first one 2 years after we got it, and we're into our second one. But okay. Yeah, we love the car.
And I went to the ceremony where you got the first one. Yes. I remember that.
Yes.
Anyway, Mark, so tell us your situation. You're a state representative, and you're running for Congress. What does this mean in terms of your political life and future?
Well, it means that I'm not going to run for State House anymore. I got elected first time in 1994, and 20 years later we made this decision. I can't run for two races, and because both races are two-year terms, I'm going to have to end up running just for one. So we made a conscious decision in August of 2013 to focus on the congressional race, and as a result, I gave my last speech on the House floor on May 1st, just a few weeks ago, and you know, just truly appreciated the honor of serving the state of Hawaii and the residents of Aiea Pro City over the past 20 years. But now we're laser beam focused 100% on the congressional race.
Why are you going to Congress?
That is a great question. Bottom line is this. Sammy, my wife, and I have two beautiful kids. Matthew is 12, Kyla's 11. They both go to public schools in Aiea, and they're doing very well. I met my wife at the University of Hawaii. We were both serving in the student government, and you know, she's been there for me all throughout my political life. We knew each other before I ran for office in '94. We got married in '97, and you know, she's been my partner for more than 2 decades. We are really concerned about the future. We want to give our children the best opportunities while in school. if they decide to go away for college and you know, go to one of those great schools in the mainland, you know, we'll support them. We believe that the University of Hawaii is a great 10-campus system, and you know, we would also support them staying here. But what comes after college for our family is why I'm running for office. You know, the cost of housing right now is about $800,000. You know, people are struggling, and I want to make sure that our kids across the entire state have the opportunities just like we have to live in this beautiful state, you know, raise families and grow old together. I just talked to a friend of mine who's a major general, 2-star general, who decided to relocate to the mainland because the costs in Hawaii are too expensive. That is not a good equation, and that is the main reason why I'm running for Congress, because I believe that the federal government can play a significant role in our future. And when it comes to job creation and focusing on some of these other areas that we can talk about as well, the federal government is going to play a big role.
Yeah, so interesting. And people grouse about, you know, the situation in the state on many levels, but they don't realize that there's a connection, and you know, a significant connection between what happens in the state and what happens in Washington.
Absolutely.
And you can do things in Washington that will help the state. Yeah. Well, so here we are, and you know, it's a matter of finding platform points and explaining to people, you know, how you feel and what you can do on those platform points. And I guess one thing I would ask you, particularly in view of the fact that you spent so many years in the National Guard, I mean, that's way above the norm, really. And you've identified with the military. I do too. I was in the Coast Guard for several years.
Great.
And I care about them. Is, you know, your position on the military. You know, there have been two things, you know, in the paper recently. One is General Shinseki is under fire. Veterans Administration is under serious fire. And the other is, you know, we have a new world situation on our hand, a situation that may have elements of the Cold War returning, with the new alliance, as it were, between China and Russia, both of whom are sort of anti-West powers. And we have been reducing military spending, and this may or may not be a good idea going forward. So can you address those points?
Well, let me just say this from the start. I've been a proud member of the Hawaii Army National Guard for the past 15 years. I currently serve as a lieutenant colonel, and I'm hoping to continue in my service to the National Guard. And the beauty of the Guard is it's both focused on the federal mission when called upon by the President, but the most important priority for the National Guard is really at the state level. So when we talk about things like natural or man-made disasters or support to our state government and our governor, the National Guard is really where it's at. I tell some people, everybody salutes the American flag when the Star-Spangled Banner is playing. Very few people can hold the salute and salute the Hawaiian flag when Hawaii Pono'i is playing. And the National Guard members are the only ones that can do that. And I'm very proud of my service to both our state and our nation. Having said that, I've spent most of my career in the legislature supporting the military. We created the Hawaii's Military Appreciation Package in 2004. It's been 10 sessions. So I have a long track record of supporting the military. And frankly, there's many people in Hawaii, based on recent polls, that suggest that the support for the military and the defense industry is pretty solid here in Hawaii. And I'd like to think that it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future. But when you talk about Shinseki, one of the things that I say on the outset is that the priority of the Veterans Administration must focus on the veterans. And we've had some challenges over the recent years. I think that most of the challenges are because of the significant increase in veterans because of the Middle East wars. But this past most recent challenge in Phoenix, and now the investigations throughout many of our VA facilities, is troubling. Because as I said before, the priority and focus must be on our veterans, and it's just unconscionable. It's disgusting. It just makes me very upset if those allegations are found to be true, and we've lost some of our veterans because of just poor service or just poor leadership or lack thereof. Then we've got to make some changes. But at this point, I've said it before, General Shinseki is a very strong leader. He's done a great job so far in the VA secretary position, and it's just not the time, I think, to replace the highest levels of the Veterans Administration. Let's task the general to finding out what's going on, and let's fix it. In terms of the rebalancing to the Pacific, as you mentioned, there are pockets of hotspots in our region. And I think now that the Middle East is being drawn down and the refocus, rebalancing or pivot to the Pacific is occurring, Hawaii is going to play a very strategic role. I believe, as you had mentioned, that a strong military is a deterrent. And I talk about many of our partnerships that we have with the National Guard. I've been to Indonesia twice and Singapore just last year. Those experiences highlight the need for a strong military, because we develop partnerships with some of the strongest armies and militaries throughout the region, and I believe that it stabilizes the region. So I would like to think that our efforts in this region, in terms of humanitarian efforts, will continue. But the most strategic, most important reason why the rebalancing to the Pacific is important is just to keep the region stable.
And to focus on that means benefit for Hawaii, for sure.
Absolutely.
There talk about how maybe there's not as much military activity here as there used to be, or that there was supposed to be. And Dan Inouye's death, has given us a disadvantage about that. But I think somebody in Congress could have an effect on it, no?
Absolutely. I tell people that I committed the past 20 years to be in the legislature. My wife and I and our family have committed, if everything works out, to 20 years in Congress. There's a reason why Senator Inouye and Senator Kaka stayed in office for a very long time, and seniority does matter in in Congress in Washington, D.C., and this particular position, the first congressional seat for Hawaii, I believe needs to have someone there committed long term, because we're going to have to continue working hard to draw down federal support and federal monies. It's very important for our state.
Let's move to another subject, Mark. This is Mark Takai, representative, Democrat in the State House. He's running for Congress, and the show is Community Matters, and I'm Jay Fidell here in the ThinkTech Talk series. I guess I want to go to the question of sustainability.
Sure.
Everybody talks about it, I mean, to the point where sustainability has to be redefined, or at least defined, so that people know exactly what the boundaries of the discussion are. This is part of your platform. Can you give us a handle on that?
Well, at the very start of the show, you asked me why I'm running for Congress, and I mentioned my 2 kids. And I talked about the future of Hawaii and how difficult it is right now for families to live here. The biggest reason, I believe, is because we are the farthest landmass from anybody, farthest inhabited landmass from everyone, and there comes some challenges with being an island state. The biggest challenge I see is that we're exporting $9 billion a year to import $7 billion in foreign fossil fuel and $2 billion in food. We need to fix that, Jay. I mean, that's a lot of money. $9 billion a year going out of our economy, and we're importing things that are harmful to the environment. And in the food food part, the $2 billion deficit in our food production is just not healthy. We only have 6 days of food supply on Oahu, so if there's a natural or man-made disaster, we won't be able to handle our food for our people much longer than a week. If we fix this delta through sustainability efforts, through greening our economy, through developing more resources outside of burning foreign fossil fuel to produce our electricity, growing more of our food, reducing that delta, keeping some of that billions in Hawaii, can you imagine what that'll do? I mean, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about being able to afford a whole bunch of different things that we talk about, potholes in our streets, better schools, just everything will improve, and the tide will rise, and I believe that it'll make for a better economy and a better home for our people. On
the other side of it is, if we don't do these things, we'd be at great risk, because a mono economy is fragile.
Right. And I can talk briefly about my experiences as a family, our experiences as a family. I deployed in 2009 to the Middle East, came home, and suggested to my wife that we put these panels on our roof. She wasn't too thrilled. She really didn't understand it. But I told her, let's just try it out and see what happens. We put up 12 panels. We spent $15,000. As you know, there's a 65% tax credit, both federal and state. And within 2 months, we brought our electric bill down to almost nothing. It sold her. She started selling it to her friends. And after that, we got more panels. You had mentioned my car. We put a whole house fan in. I converted recently, maybe about 3-4 months ago, to LED fixtures in our home. So we're doing everything we can as a family. And I have a challenge for our kids. We turn off the lights. We treat electricity just like we treat water.
Yeah.
Someone leaves the room and there's the light on. I tell them, hey, who left this light on? It's just like water. Got to turn it off when it's not in use. So just by doing that, believe it or not, we reduce consumption by about 30%. So people out there should really impress upon their families and friends and coworkers that when you don't need to use a light or something tied to electricity, if you turn it off, there's going to be considerable savings. So that's what we're doing as a family. But what I'm talking about in terms of sustainability is much more. We need to encourage more massive scales of green technology, wind, air, solar, water. I mean, a whole bunch of things that we're looking at, and the federal government plays a huge role.
Well, I mean, Senator Brian Schatz's also running for the Senate now. His campaign office is maybe 100 feet away from where we're sitting.
Right.
He's big on energy. He sits on the subcommittee, I think, in energy in the Senate. And I mean, it's all part of the same thing. It's the modern 21st sustainability issue. And really the question is, what exactly do you think Congress should do to not only help sustainability on a nationwide basis, but specifically in Hawaii?
Okay, well, let's talk about, I mean, Congress and the federal government has played a significant role as we rolled out some of the initiatives like solar and wind. But now we're looking at some other stuff. We're looking at wave generation and the ability to create electricity through waves. That is demonstration projects. We have some on the windward side at the Marine Corps base. That's all federally funded. I introduced 2 measures in the legislature this year. One was to create hydrogen fuel stations, 3 of them on Oahu. The other one was to redefine electric vehicle to include hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Hydrogen is definitely the next wave. It's still very expensive. I don't think anybody can afford a hydrogen vehicle. Governments can. Fleet vehicles for governments, both at the state and federal level, can. But we're going to need to, put some money into it. And it's always like that. When we start looking at new technology, it's really government that pushes the envelope, so to speak. And, when you talk about what can federal government do, I just mentioned those 2 things. I mean, research and development in the area of green technology and sustainability is a function and a priority and must continue to be a priority of the federal government.
Yeah, I agree, because in states, they may not have the money or the political will, or they may not fully understand how risky it is not to be sustainable. And if the federal government comes along and helps them, gives them funding, support, something, that's going to kickstart some initiatives in the state. One of them I think is really interesting is the sustainability as it relates to climate change.
Yes.
And Hawaii is very exposed on
Yes.
that level. And don't you think Congress could do something about that?
Yeah, actually, above sustainability, and I should have mentioned this from the top, is climate change. Because as we become more sustainable, we work on preventing and coping with climate change. Climate change is happening. We see the very extreme winters that we had on the mainland. I think they called it the polar vortex. There were like 3 of them that happened, in the span of like 4 months. But even in Hawaii, we saw some significant erosion issues on the north side on Oahu, and we see the change. I mean, you looked in Civil Beach just a few days ago, talked about the increase of the ocean levels and how just a small change of that's going to be devastating and pretty much catastrophic to Waikiki and our tourism industry. So you're absolutely right. I mean, climate change is definitely a federal function, but at the state level, we're beginning to really focus in on it as well.
Yeah, I remember, I mean, you may have a different view of this, but I remember that in rail, and we are where we are in rail, once it became clear that the federal government was going to support rail and provide billions of dollars for rail, that made it a lot easier to proceed with the initiative. In the case of climate change, sometimes it's just hard to get started for one reason or another. In the case of New York, with Mayor Bloomberg, now no longer in office, but he actually started building structures that would deal with sea level change. And that was pretty impressive. And we have to get to the action implementation point. With federal funds, that would be a lot easier.
Yes. Right. So I know that the Army Corps of Engineers has a plan for the Alawai to build levees around there. I mean, we're talking about some significant changes happening, and as a result of that, trying to cope. You look at what happened in New Orleans, you look at Hurricane Sandy in the East Coast, and you mentioned New York. I mean, those are significant issues. I've been to Venice. I've seen and I've walked through knee-deep water in St. Mark's Square. And surprisingly for that community, it's just kind of a normal thing. I don't think it would be too normal to walk through Waikiki in knee-deep water. And we're going to have to deal with it. But from my perspective, the more we can do to prevent these types of significant climate changes from happening, the better, because it's going to be easier to cope with and to build levees and walls and structures to deal with the eventual rise in the tide is going to be, I think, much more expensive than doing some of our sustainability initiatives.
Yeah, so it's another unfunded liability right now.
Yeah.
And of course, the most important thing, you're sort of a 21st century person, seeing down the road, and I think that's critical. In government, so often we see everything in terms of 2-year and 4-year bites, but we have to see further. And one of the biggest issues is the future, and that means our kids, our human resources.
Right.
And I know you have some strong positions on education. I wonder if you would express them.
Well, I mentioned early on the reason why I'm running for Congress is because of my children, but also for all the kids. My wife and I are both products of the public school system. Our 2 kids now attend schools in Aiea. We think the school system has done quite well for our children. I've been engaged and involved in the school system from a kid, but as a lawmaker, I've been participating in education reform from the very beginning of my first days in office in 1994. Education will continue to play a significant role. And the beauty of our system here in Hawaii, and also the system across the United States, is that we take everyone. We have an obligation. It's a responsibility that we have done very different from many of the other nations. We say that if a child, we say that children must go to school, and we need to provide the schools and the opportunities for kids to succeed in the future. It's much cheaper to do that than to deal with them, in prisons or in the welfare system and building social services for them. The federal government has a significant role to play in education. I believe, though, that some of the things that the federal government has done, focusing on the nitty-gritty and the nuts and bolts in education systems, might be a little bit too low. I think they should, federal government should stay maybe at about the 30,000 level and work with states to develop systems in place. I believe that NCLB and the Common Core and a few other federal initiatives have moved us forward. But most recently with the implementation of the evaluation systems and some of the things that happened over the course of the few years with NCLB has caused some significant erosion and significant exodus of very qualified and master level teachers. And we've got to be very careful about destroying a system just because we want to put in other things. So I go back to the fact that I'm as a parent, my wife and I, we as parents are invested in our education system. My wife served as the president of the parent-teacher organization for our elementary school the last couple of years. She's transitioning now to the intermediate school's band booster program. So we believe in our education system, and I think with that perspective, I'm very proud to have the support of both the HSTA and the NEA, and also the University of Hawaii Professional Assembly, the faculty union,
that's great.
For our race for Congress.
Yeah, that's how I met you, when you were chair of the higher education.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Any thoughts on higher education in Hawaii as affected by Congress?
Oh yes, absolutely. There's a number of things that the federal government plays a role in higher ed. The most important, I think, it has to do with access to affordable and available student aid. We have some issues there. We have significant increases in the interest rates that are causing a significant default rate. We have about a 45% default rate in our student loan programs at the federal level. I'm under the impression that I don't think people that get student loans purposely default. I think there are challenges facing some of our graduates. So I would like to see a system in place that, based on your ability to earn, is how quickly you can pay. Social sciences and the humanities may not be able to pay as quickly as someone in the natural sciences or engineering or law or some other business, you know. So I'd like to see that change. And there are a couple, maybe more proposals in Congress right now focus in on student financial aid and some of those creative ideas. The other thing is research and innovation and the support for that really are federal priorities and must continue to be federal priorities. We have pockets of federal programs that need the support of higher education institutions. So with the partnership of the federal government funding and the expertise at universities and colleges throughout the nation is how we move this nation forward, and that's going to have to continue. So those are the two main things that I believe the federal government will and must continue to play a big role in higher education. And you know, the University of Hawaii is a great system. It's a 10-system campus. It serves not only the 4-year baccalaureate and master's and doctorate degree students, but also 7-campus community college system that serves as a transition to the 4-year, but more importantly, really focuses on workforce development. And I think we've got a great system, and I'm looking forward to continuing advocating for the university and working hard. I love the University of Hawaii. You know, my wife and I said before, we met there. I owe a lot to the University of Hawaii, and I'm going to continue to advocate and support them.
I doubt you'd take a position on this, but any comments on the current contention over whether a military general is qualified to serve as the president of the university?
You know, at the very beginning of this process, I made it very clear that my position is really to have someone local run the university. I think over time we've second-guessed ourselves, in some cases shortchanged the ability of our local people. So my condition from the start was I'd like to see someone with local ties run the university. Having said that, the decision to select the president is really a Board of Regents prerogative and actually responsibility. And you know, I've gone through many, or I've watched and commented on many presidential selection processes. I know there's some talk now to consider canceling everything and hiring a professional search committee, but we've done that. And you know, presidential search companies get paid a portion or a percentage of what the president will make. You know, there's incentives built on that system to find someone quickly and to pay them a lot. We did that. It was a disaster from my perspective. I think we should let the regents go through this process, and if they choose to step back and reevaluate and restart it or bring some other people in, that's their decision. But I truly believe that having someone with local ties to the university and to the state is going to help stabilize the crisis that we've seen over the past decade at the university.
The last thing I'd like to talk to you about, Mark, is, by the way, that's Representative Mark Takai. He's running for Congress, and this is Community Matters. I'm Jay Fidell in the ThinkTech series. And we're talking to him in the middle of a campaign, I suppose. But what I'd like to discuss with you is why this election, this campaign, this array of possibilities is so important for Hawaii. And I'll just tell you my thoughts briefly.
Okay.
We're at a kind of tipping point. We have economic issues, we have sustainability issues, we have educational issues, including higher education. We have a change in the in the international scene that's unfolding right now today. And I just wonder, you know, the level of concern you have about the future and the connection between, you know, your campaign and running for office and having some effect in Congress has to do with your feelings on these points.
Well, I agree with you 100%, all the above. I really believe that this is going to be a watershed, huge election that we're going to talk about for decades. Now, there are, as you mentioned, all of these issues that have come to the forefront, but the bottom line, from my perspective, is when Senator Inouye passed away, and when Senator Kaka decided to step down, and we created this void in Congress in Washington, D.C., I think it got a lot of people thinking. From my perspective, I would not be running if Colleen Hanabusa decided to stay, but she made the decision to run for U.S. Senate. Her seat's open. I'm 46. I spent 20 years in the legislature, 20 great years in the legislature. I have a couple more decades to serve if given the opportunity. So from my perspective, it was just the right time to make that commitment for my family and for me. And I think everybody else in the race and other people that are running in other races, I think see it from the same lens. You know, there's just a huge void now that, you know, we have to work hard to replace. Senator Inouye's legacy is going to continue for generations to come. You know, we just passed a bill in the legislature to create an art piece in honor of him. We've named numerous buildings, programs, School of Pharmacy on the Big Island. There's so many things happening. My goal, if elected in Congress, is to continue that legacy as much as I can, to work hard to build the seniority, and to, as much as possible, lessen the impacts of the Inouye cliff. We have significant challenges facing us, and we need leaders in Washington, D.C. that'll work hard to continue supporting our state through resources at the federal level.
Yeah, so interesting that Washington is a kind of a snake pit these days.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I think Brian Schatz is making good progress there, but it isn't easy. And you have the Tea Party and the Republicans who would rather just hurt somebody, in my view now, than actually get anything done. How can you cope with that?
That's a good question. Here's what I say. In the legislature, I've worked very closely with both sides of the aisle. I have good friends on the Republican side. I have good friends on the Democratic side. And the fact is that the House of Representatives is being run by a coalition government put together with some in the Republican Party, actually all the Republicans and some in the Democrats. I think that's a very good model. In fact, one of the very first things I'd like to do, if elected, is to reach out to all the members, all the 434 other members of Congress, introduce myself and get to know them. And I think Tulsi Gabbard is doing a great job. She works out with some of the Republicans and Democrats. In fact, Congressman Ryan, I think, is her workout buddy. And, you know, I think the days that Patsy Mink, Senator Inouye supporting Ted Stevens, the Republican senator from Alaska, we need to get back to those days. People have talked glowingly about opportunities in the evening when Democrat colleagues and Republican colleagues would get together and share great stories and personal things. We have that here at the legislature. It's been like that for the last 20 years. I would like to see some of that type of friendship and camaraderie and working together restored at the federal level as well. And that is something that I'm going to work hard doing. We're not going to agree on everything. In fact, I think a lot of times I'm going to disagree with the Republicans and definitely the Tea Partiers. But that doesn't mean that we can't work together and we can't care about our country and work hard and you know, get things done.
Mark, we have maybe a minute left, and I wonder if you could just face a camera, tell them why they should vote for you.
Yeah, so my name is Mark Takai. I'm a state representative for the past 20 years, and my wife and I have two wonderful children, Matthew and Kyla. We're running for office at the congressional level, the 1st Congressional District of Hawaii, because we believe in this state. We believe in the United States of America and our nation, and we believe that our children, Matthew and Kyla and all the children across this nation, this great nation, need leadership at the highest levels of the federal government to ensure a successful future. And we're going to be there for the next 20 years if given the opportunity to build the seniority, to build the support, to continue serving this great state. And I look forward to the next few weeks and couple more months in this campaign, and I encourage people, if they're interested in learning a little bit more about us, to check us out on our website. It's marktakai.com, and give us a call or an email. We'd love to talk with you. Thank you.
Mark. You're a great guest on the show. This is
you.
Community Matters. That's Representative Mark Takai running for Congress, and we really appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
Aloha.
Aloha.